So this is lesson 3.2. Kind of laying the foundation for this unit on quadratics. So we're simplifying complex radicals. The first thing you want to do, if you ever notice a negative underneath a radical, is remember our definition that we just talked about. So if you ever have the square root of -1, that equals I. And this begins our discussion on imaginary numbers. So the negative comes out, that's an I. And then from here we just simplify the square root of 128 as we have previously. So thinking about the square root of 128, dividing it by 2. Okay, cool. So that becomes square root of 64 can be simplified. That is a perfect square. Worked out well. Is 8. Square root of 64 is 8. The 2 stays underneath. Don't forget about the I. We just bring that down. And it goes after the number, before the radical. So it's kind of like x. You write the variable after the number. So for number 1, the answer is 8I radical 2.
So it's the same, but I put an I.
Pretty much.
That's wild.
So then, number 3, there's a negative there. Bring it out. So now we have an I. And the 20 can be factored. Okay, we can do 10 and 2, and then 5 and 2. So we're doing the jailbreak method here. So we've got a pair of 2's, and they break out as 1, 2. The 5 has to stay underneath. And don't forget about the I. So the final answer here, simplified, is 2I radical 5.
I expected this to be overly complicated.
It's not. It's not that bad. Number 5, the negative comes out as an I. And now we have the square root of 100. 10. So now this is just 10I. I'll do one more. Any number on the page. You pick.
10.
Yeah,
10. Okay. 10 wins. So the negative comes out as an I. 512. Let's see. 512 we could divide by 2. And then it'll go in 2 times. 256. Is 256 a perfect square?
Is it? Yeah.
See what happens when you know your perfect squares? It makes it so much easier. If not, just double check or put it in your calculator. Square root of 256. What is that? 16 squared.
Oh, wait, what?
So square root of 256 is 16. So it's going to come out with the I. So it's 16I radical 2. Thanks. We're going to flip it over to the back. On the back, similar to our last practice, we just have a number in front of the radical, so we have to keep that in mind. Plays in just like the I did on the other side. We just multiply it in at the end. So here, first things first, bring out the I. We just had square root of 20 on the front.
We put the I after the number.
So square root of 20 factors into,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, we could have done it that way if we did the perfect square factor method. 4 is a perfect square, so ultimately it winds up being 2 radical 5. Then we bring down the 4I, multiply it. So 8I, right, it's going to be the same regardless of which method you choose, you should get 8I radical 5. Number 13, bring out the I. So now we have 4I radical 64 is the square root of 64? 8. So we have 32I. Do one more, 15.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Here?
Yeah.
So I had the square root of 64 was 8, right? And I already had the 4I on the outside. So 4 times 8 is 32. And I have to have the I because there was a negative underneath the radical.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, so then number 15, the negative comes out. It's an I. So then 320. Okay, 2 and 160. And then 16 and 10. How do you want to go from here, 16 and 10? Keep going? Or do you just want to notice?
Oh, 16's a perfect square.
Okay, so 16 is a perfect square, so I know that's going to come out. 10 I can continue to factor down. So not only do I have the square root of 16 that can come out, which is 4, I also have this pair of 2's, which can do a jailbreak as 1, 2. And then the 5 is left underneath. Yes, negative 5I, and then the 2 and the 4, that's going to be 8. And then when we multiply negative 5 times 8, that's negative 40. Keep the I, radical 5.
So whether the outside number has a negative, it's always going to be an I.
Yeah, and I think that's a tricky thing because the negative underneath the radical absorbs into that I on the outside, right? This negative became, the square root of negative 1 became an I. But if there's a negative on the outside, you do need to keep track of that. Yep. All right, so the rest of this you can practice on your own.